Hi everyone, thank you for staying for me. My name is Erika Roux, I'm an artist based in Amsterdam. And I'm gonna talk about a collaborative project that I'm currently developing with another artist, Pilar Mata-Dupont. She's right now in Australia, so that's why she can't be here. And this project is called the Polder Western. So the Polder Western is an umbrella title for a series of future works that uses the language of Western film to investigate personal concerns arising from living in an environmentally vulnerable country, the Netherlands, that is facing complex issues right now, such as climate change and the rise of sea level, and its subsequent management. And the last summer, we spent 3 months researching and writing collaboratively on a speculative screenplay. And I haven't really thought about how to present actually the screenplay. I'm going to present more the ideas than the screenplay, but if you want later, I can, if you want to read on my computer or some parts, you're welcome to do it. So this screenplay is the first outcome for a series of work. And there will be different outcomes with the idea that there will be a future film, potentially. So with Pilar, we have been for a long time willing to collaborate on a project because our work is both strongly employing filmic language and cinematic devices. Although we are both visual artists and filmmakers, but we are mostly working within the visual art scene. But our methodologies and focuses are quite different. Pilar has a practice spanning from film and installation, photography and text. I'm going to introduce very briefly, and because I have a lot to talk about. But our work delves into the viability and malleability of narratives, of history and memory. And her Argentinian background and her bringing in Australia, Argentina, and Brunei Darussalam, all settler states and former colonies, serve as a lens for her through which she frames her work. And she's experienced in making long-term, larger production in moving image-based projects. And she works also closely with institutions sometimes. And on the other hand, I have a very intuitive and DIY approach to producing works. For me, filmmaking and script writing becomes a process of encounter in which I create a specific bond with individuals or group of people or community. And in my work, often it's in domestic and private environment that I find a place of investigating politically and socially charged questions. And I also involve a lot of improvisation, role play, fiction, confronted with documentary material. So the idea to work in collaboration came from a desire to bring our methodologies in dialogue, learn from each other's experience and expertise, and explore a common interest in cinematic trope. And in that case, the Western film. So we have been talking about this collaboration for a while, but it's during the COVID lockdown that we finally had time to think about how to work together. And we realized that we were both interested in reflecting on the country and landscape that we've lived on for so many years, which is the Netherlands. And this interest might have been triggered by the lockdown, restriction forcing us to stay and look at our direct and surrounding. But it was also coming from a growing anxiety that we were experiencing in relation to living on what felt a more and more vulnerable and uncertain situation in regards to climate change and the fact that the Netherlands is under sea level. So, yeah. As we all know, a large portion of the Netherlands is a creation made by humans through a history of taking land from the sea. And keeping the sea at bay is still an ongoing condition vital for us, its inhabitants. And we were interested in this man-made landscape, its history, but also the Dutch response in the face of the looming catastrophe, or the current catastrophe that represents climate change. And so we came with those questions: what does it tell about the culture of the place we live in, or what does this man-made Dutch frontier on the sea expresses? Can it express historical, anthropological, or political relationships of human and nature? And we came. We came upon this article by Hub Zwart, Aquaphobia, Tulip Mania, Biophilia, a moral geography of the Dutch landscape. And he coins in this article, he writes that the concept of moral geography. He writes that different types of landscape are read as a manifestation of different moral attitudes towards nature. And he calls this moral geography. And by analyzing the history of the shaping of the Dutch landscape, he retraces the evolution of Dutch culture. So for instance, in Roman times, the Netherlands was mostly marshland, like you see here. And until the 11th century, its inhabitants would live on terps and were practicing a passive form of sea defense, adjusting their life to the coming and going of the sea. Nature was a sort of demonic force beyond human control. From a moral geographic perspective, he notes that those transitions on the level of water management, where then it became nature was something to control and the sea something to keep outside of the territory, that this transition coincides with a spiritual or ideological level of change. So basically through the Christianization of the country, the perception of nature and water and its management had changed. Christianity entailed a more active stance towards nature. And the Christians regarded themselves as stewards appointed by God, as co-creators, taking active part in the management and the restitution of fallen nature. And he continues in the article through different evolution of the Dutch culture, and he analyzes through the landscape what he calls moral geography. And this idea of So this idea of an unwelcoming and hostile natural land to be conquered and controlled, and the conditions that have shaped the Dutch perception of water also echoes to us the Western myth of the frontier and the cowboy settlers' relation to the natural landscape around them, and their relation to the taking and the making of their own nation. Our research started with visiting many key locations, but most importantly, having conversation with different people whose life and work is closely related to the sea and the water management in the Netherlands. So through the development of the project, we continuously hold conversations with scientists, engineers, sea-level researchers, but also dijkbewakers, which are like volunteers who work on maintaining the dikes and keep an eye on the conditions on the dikes, millers, farmers, artists also, and so on. And our primary knowledge was quite limited, so the project is for us a way to learn a lot and to become aware of the different communities and parameters conditioning and being conditioned by water management in the country. And we were particularly interested in the different options that the Netherlands are exploring as strategies for dealing with the rise of the sea level. And one is to build bigger dikes, and the other, as Hubsvaart mentioned at the end of his article, is to let the water come in some areas by depoldering, so breaking the dikes and letting water in a controlled manner come into the land, and to let the sea reclaim some area. And we see that through the rethinking of how to deal with nature, the sea or non-human sentient beings are becoming more part of, like we are considering them on a different level than before. So yeah, this is like one plan, or like that's an example of like how the water would come in. But we understood also that this process of depoldering that some ecologist movement advocate isn't without complication. And for instance, we have the Hedwige polder, that is former polder area. And in 2025, they decided that to let the water go in this polder so that it becomes a wetland again. When we first heard about it, it was mostly framed as an ecological conservation. But actually, the main reason for the depoldering is because of a policy that is to rewild some area in exchange for the space taken by the expansion of the Antwerpen Harbor. And in this process, many farmers were displaced and many inhabitants fought for their land in a standoff until forced to move. So here again, those complications around how to deal with territory reminded us of complicated aligning or conflict of or commercial and ecological conflict in interest in plots of Western films. Last summer we spent 3 months on a residency called the Waterwerken. That's the space. It's in Amsterdam. This is so the residence is within this space called Buitenplaats Brienenoord, and it's on the Brienenoord Island in Rotterdam. So it's an island that is situated a bit out. It's within the ring, but outside of the center of Rotterdam. And they invite artists to make a work related to water. So the island is located on the Maas, and it was a particularly relevant place for us because it's in itself a result of nature and human intervention. It appeared in the 19th century. It was a spill out of sand linked to the expansion of the harbor, and it's an interesting case study because we found a book on the residency that Ellen Kreinen edited, or it was the author, and it shows that the island went through many changes in a quite funny way, actually. There were a constant conversation and plans around what the area should become. And again, there was those conflicting interests or conflicting visions for the island. And because it was also not that interesting to put too much economical investment in it, it stayed this in-between place without knowing really who controlled the island. So for instance, it was proposed to make it an erotic center to take on the pressure from the Katendrecht area that is where there was a lot of prostitution. It became a training area for police dog, but then the visitors were scared of the dog, so it stopped. It was a center for educating young men. And right now it's being rehabilitated to welcome more visitors for recreational purposes. So when I knew the island from a while ago, and it was quite rough area, and now they put it this thing, so we can like wooden paths, you can take a swim, and they cut down a lot of trees. They made marshlands or like ponds where birds should be able to go. And there was this interesting quote in the book that was quite skeptic about these new plans. So here you will find all kinds of nuances between nature and human interference, such as have disappeared elsewhere in our country. Nature is still unintentional present here. We thought it was quite nice how they call it unintentionally present, in contrast to nature that has been brightened up with bird hides, large grazers, and colored walking routes. Yeah, and it goes on. I'm not gonna read the whole, but it's a bit similar actually to the farmer from the Hedvigepolder. It was also an argument for the farmers that it would become a touristic area where tourists and highly cultured people would come. So the residency also allowed us to continue the research and take some time off from our work and individual practice. So it was quite good for us for the collaboration, because Pilar and I are working as producer, and we have individual practice as well. So it was a good time to focus and really work on the text. And the organizers who are all born and grew up in the Netherlands were really helpful in helping us to reach out to people that we wouldn't otherwise be able to meet. For instance, we met a miller who lives in a water mill that pumps out the water from the polder, and he told us that he always wanted to live in a machine. We met a sea-level researcher that told us that before buying her house, she looked if the house would be protected by 2 dikes. So all those stories kind of fed into the screenplay. And we wanted all those different visions, all those different characters, and all those different perceptions of territory to come together in the text. So the writing of the screenplay was a place for us to reflect and bring all those things together, and it became a text with interweaving stories with different conversations, and it felt also quite important that besides the humans figures, non-humans should have an equal role as characters. So the sea became one of the protagonists, and basically in the plot, nature is taking a new agencies, borders are being redefined by some mysterious force, and we are imagining how the inhabitants would respond. And for this, the Western was a quite playful format to translate through anachronism, through absurdism, through cliché, this feeling of being kind of stuck as human in responding or managing a catastrophe that is too big for us. And rather than aiming at writing a traditional screenplay, that would instruct us for making a film. It was more literary work, so we see it more as a text work, and so maybe this was a sort of informal presentation of the screenplay. So there were fragments, and people could go and read some of the screenplay, and so it was a bit of we wanted to have them on pause, and they were way too big, and we thought it was quite interesting to keep them this way to translate this the absurdity of the whole play. And then we also wrote songs that are part of the screenplay, and then we were trying out, we composed some songs with a musician, Berger Andersen. I'm trying to bring it here, but where is it? Yeah. And the song was on a loop for they were performing for 2.5 hours, the same song. So also to kind of translate this feeling of being stuck or being in a story that is always being retold constantly.
I don't belong in oceanography. I don't belong in meteorology. I focus on projections, climate model collections. People say that I'm a fortune teller, but no one listens to me. We're the models that measure the sea. We can sure put on a band-aid, but we can't cure the disease.
It's gonna be published, so in December. So those are sketches of the design. So it's still quite open how it's gonna look, and it's gonna be published by an imprint in Amsterdam called Building Fiction. Those are sketches from the design by Rudy Gwetsch, who is also the person who initiated this, who is also the publisher. Yeah, that's it.